She was 32 years old, a woman who had clawed her way up from modest beginnings in Phoenix, Arizona, and carved out a name for herself in a city where dreams often dried out faster than the desert air. Her name was Lila Carson, and she ran a small but thriving marketing agency built on grit, long nights, and the quiet belief that if she worked harder than anyone else, success would eventually notice her. For years, she told herself that recognition would come, and maybe, just maybe, her family would finally see her for more than what she could give them. The call came on a Wednesday evening, her father's voice warm, almost celebratory. "Come early," he said. "We're throwing a dinner for you." Lila's heart skipped. After years of watching her efforts overlooked, after carrying her family on her shoulders, they were gathering to celebrate her promotion to director. The thought stirred something tender inside her. She imagined the evening with her parents smiling proudly, her brother raising a toast, her mother beaming with genuine pride. She slipped into her best dress that night, the fabric hugging her frame as she whispered to herself, "Maybe this time, they'll see me." The resort shimmered with chandeliers and soft golden light. Lila walked into the buzzing ballroom, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and perfume. A waiter pressed a name tag into her hand, and when she glanced down, her stomach dropped. Two words stared back at her like a cruel joke: limited guest. She froze, the laughter and chatter around her suddenly sharp, mocking. Her sister leaned in close, her whisper a blade against Lila's ear. "That means no food, just drinks." Her mother burst into loud laughter, the kind that carried across the room as though it were the punchline to a joke she'd been waiting to tell. Her brother smirked from the bar, glass raised to his lips as though her discomfort were a show meant just for him. The room tilted, spinning around her as the cruel realization struck. This was not a celebration. It was a stage for her humiliation. She stood still, not yelling, not crying. Instead, she did something unexpected. With hands steady, she reached for her phone, her voice calm in her mind even as her heart raced. "Cancel everything immediately." Her thumb pressed send, and 30 minutes later, her family's phones buzzed in unison. Laughter died. Faces drained of color. The room shifted, but she stayed still, holding her glass of water, her face unreadable. What would you do if your own family invited you to a party just to remind you were less than them? Would you laugh it off? Would you run? Or would you, like Lila, reclaim the power they thought they owned? She thought back to the years she had given and given, believing sacrifice would buy her place in their hearts. She had built her agency from nothing, a dozen sleepless nights stacking into years, chasing clients, chasing reputation, building something out of thin air. And yet, every success had been swallowed whole by her family's demands. Her father James, her mother Caroline, her brother Daniel, they never praised her for what she built. They only treated her triumphs as an open vault. It had started small, or at least it had seemed that way. A call from Daniel after he'd lost another job. His voice shaky but rehearsed. "Just need a little help with rent." She wired $3,000 to cover his Tempe apartment. Later, her mother's knee surgery brought medical bills. "You're doing so well." Caroline had cooed, her smile polished, her tone dripping with entitlement. $5,000 gone. Then her father's ventures, vague and ever-shifting. 8,000 here, 10,000 there. He needed car repairs, then a new opportunity, then another round of promises that never came true. Family helps family. That phrase haunted her. She'd heard it first from her grandmother Helen, a woman who believed sacrifice was love and duty was unquestionable. Lila had internalized it so deeply that she opened a company account just to streamline the requests. She told herself it was organized generosity. In reality, it became an open wallet, one they dipped into freely. They saw her not as a daughter or sister, but as a bank with endless hours of withdrawals. 3 years later, her accountant's warning landed like a stone in her chest. $50,000 gone. Not spent on survival. Not spent on true needs. Daniel's console instead of rent. Caroline's spa retreat in place of medical bills. James's golf trips masquerading as business ventures. Lila ignored the voice that told her this was exploitation. She clung to the faint hope that her love would one day be enough to earn their love back. But when the promotion came her biggest career achievement, yet the silence from her family was louder than any applause. No calls, no texts, just absence. Only her grandmother sent a card, and even that felt like an afterthought, a habit rather than heartfelt pride. It was Monica, her friend and confidant, who gave her the truth she had been running from. "They don't value you," she said, sharp and unflinching. Still, when James called with his warm, rehearsed voice promising a dinner in her honor, Lila chose hope. She wanted so desperately to believe that this time would be different. She did not know then that night would mark the beginning of her liberation. She drove to the resort that night with her stomach in knots, her hands gripping the wheel tighter than she realized. Hope and dread wrestled inside her, both voices loud, neither willing to let go. One told her that maybe this was her moment, the long-awaited recognition. The other whispered that this was just another setup, another performance where she would play the fool. The glow of the Phoenix evening wrapped the resort in glamour, chandeliers visible through the wide glass windows. She parked her car and stared at the entrance, every breath shallow, every step feeling heavier than the last. She reminded herself she was no one's doormat anymore, yet as the doors swung open, she still carried the small, fragile hope that tonight they would prove her wrong. The ballroom was alive with clinking glasses, polished laughter, and her father's colleagues exchanging business pleasantries. Lila smoothed her black dress, adjusting the thin strap on her shoulder, and stepped into the scene. The waiter greeted her with a polite nod and pressed the tag into her hand, and in that instant, the weight of years crashed down. Limited guest. Her chest tightened, her lips parted, but no sound came out. She scanned the room quickly. Her mother stood near the head table, her laughter so familiar it cut like glass. Daniel leaned against the bar, a smirk tugging at his lips, swirling his drink as if he were waiting for her reaction. Her father was shaking hands nearby, his attention elsewhere, his face betraying nothing, not even a flicker of acknowledgement that this was supposed to be her night. Daniel strolled toward her, his tone low and mocking. "No food for you," he said, tilting his head toward the tag, his grin widening. "Just drinks." The smirk became a wound she couldn't cover. Then Caroline turned, saw her daughter frozen in place, and let out a loud cackle, covering her mouth with a hand as though it was the funniest joke in the room. The guests around them chuckled awkwardly, some confused, some amused. Lila's cheeks burned hot, her throat tightening as she forced herself to remain still. It was not a dinner in her honor. It was a reminder of her place, a cruel demonstration that she was not the celebrated daughter, not the respected businesswoman, not even worthy of a meal. Just a wallet with legs. Her pulse thundered in her ears, but her hands were steady. She slid into a chair near the edge of the table and reached for her phone, her thumb flying across the screen. She typed to Monica, her friend who had warned her of this moment. "They gave me a limited guest tag. No food. I'm done." The response came instantly. "Shut down the account now." Lila hesitated, her chest aching as she considered what it meant. This was not just shutting down a line of access. It was ending years of a cycle she had allowed. Rent, medical bills, vacations, golf trips, every piece of their lives she had funded came from that account. With one decision, she could sever the cord they had been feeding on. She opened the app, scrolled to the admin settings, and stared at the button that would deactivate all secondary users. Around her, laughter swirled. Her mother's voice rose above the noise, ridiculing her tag once again. Daniel's grin sparkled under the light as he raised his glass in mock celebration. Her father finally looked her way, his eyes cold, indifferent. Her thumb pressed down. A confirmation flashed. Account access terminated. She set her phone aside, her face calm, her expression unreadable. She sipped her water as though nothing had changed, even as the entire world had shifted beneath her. 10 minutes passed before Daniel's phone buzzed. He frowned, his brow furrowed as he swiped across the screen. His smirk faltered. His mother's phone lit next, her laughter dying in her throat as she read the notification. She reached for James's arm, her face pale, whispering urgently. His jaw clenched as he pulled out his phone, his eyes narrowing as the message sank in. One by one, their gazes lifted and locked on her. The room's noise seemed to fade. She remained still, sipping her water, her hand not trembling, her eyes offering nothing. James approached first, his voice low but sharp. "What's this about, Lila?" He held up his phone, the glow of the screen reflecting in his eyes. She shrugged, her tone even. "Check your notifications." He stared, his jaw tight, his hand trembling slightly. Caroline came next, her smile gone, replaced with a scowl etched deep across her face. "You're being dramatic," she hissed, her tone carrying anger barely hidden. Daniel's voice grew louder, desperate now. "You can't just cut us off like that." Lila stood slowly, smoothing the fabric of her dress, her voice calm and deliberate. "Thanks for the drinks," she said, her eyes sharp, her tone cool. Then she turned and walked toward the exit, the echo of her heels following her out of the glowing ballroom. Behind her, voices rose, but they no longer touched her. The glow of the Phoenix night embraced her as she stepped outside, the resort lights shrinking behind her. She knew that, with one decision, one press of a button, everything had changed. For years, they had fed on her sacrifices, her blind loyalty, her willingness to believe that giving more would eventually mean being loved more. That night, she chose herself. But she also knew they weren't finished with her, not yet. 3 days later, the knock at her door echoed through her small Phoenix apartment, sharp and impatient. Lila had been sitting at her desk, sipping lukewarm coffee while reviewing a campaign draft for a new client, when the pounding started. She knew before she opened it who it was. Her stomach sank, but her jaw set firm. Her father pushed past her the moment she turned the knob, his presence filling the room with tension. Caroline followed, arms crossed, eyes already flashing with the accusation of a woman wronged. Daniel lingered behind them, his shoulders tight, his expression carved with resentment. The space that had always been her sanctuary now felt claustrophobic, every breath thick with confrontation. "You've gone too far, Lila," James said, pacing in front of her couch. His tone wasn't angry in the way strangers might expect. It was sharp, controlled, like a man lecturing a child. "Cutting us off like that, at your own celebration." Lila stood her ground, arms folded. Her voice was steady, her eyes unwavering. "You invited me to humiliate me. I just returned the favor." Caroline's hands flared wide, her tone dramatic. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We were joking with that tag, you know that. You didn't have to ruin everything." Lila shook her head. The laughter at the resort hadn't felt like a joke. It had cut deeper than words. It had been a public declaration that she was less than a second-class guest at her own event. Daniel finally spoke, leaning against the wall, his bravado stripped away. His voice cracked, unsteady. "You've screwed me over. I needed that account." Her eyes narrowed. "Needed it for what, Daniel? The $5,000 I sent for rent? Or the extra you pulled without asking?" He shifted his jaw, his eyes darting away. His silence was an answer she already suspected. Lila pressed on, her patience thinning. "I covered Mom's medical bills. $3,000 for her surgery. Dad's car repairs, his weekends away. I gave you $50,000 in 3 years. What did you all really do with it?" James stepped in quickly, sharp and defensive. "Stop interrogating him. We're family." The word family stung now, twisted beyond recognition. Lila let out a short, bitter laugh. "Family doesn't treat me like an ATM." Caroline's face hardened, her voice rising. "You've always been dramatic. We raised you, gave you everything. You owe us." The audacity hit her like a slap. "Owe you?" Lila's voice grew louder, sharper. "I paid your bills. I kept Daniel in his apartment. I funded Dad's so-called ventures. I gave you $50,000 and got nothing but a limited guest tag and your laughter in return." Daniel's head snapped up, panic flickering in his eyes. His words spilled out before he could stop them. It wasn't just rent. I used some of the money for investments. Stocks, crypto, things like that. Her chest tightened, but not with surprise, with fury. You took my company's money to gamble? Her voice dropped low, dangerous. He nodded slightly, avoiding her gaze. I thought I'd make it back. I thought I could pay you back. Every illusion shattered. For years, she had believed he was struggling, that his need was survival. But he had been scheming, risking her sacrifices for his own ambition. You lied to me, she said, each word landing like a stone. All of you did. Caroline's mouth opened, ready to argue, but Lila cut her off with a raised hand. No more money, no more favors, no more excuses. I am done. Her father's face darkened, his voice cold. You'll regret this. We're your family. Lila walked to the door, holding it open, her hand firm on the knob. Family respects each other. You never did. They hesitated, their anger cracking into unease. Daniel muttered something under his breath, his eyes glued to the floor. Caroline's glare faltered as she moved past her daughter. James left last, silent but heavy with unspoken threats. The lock clicked behind them, the sound final, grounding. Her chest ached, but her resolve stood. They had taken her money. They had mocked her, lied to her, demanded from her. But she had finally closed the door, literally and figuratively. Their betrayal wasn't new, it had always been there, but now it was undeniable, exposed in daylight. She leaned against the door, the quiet pressing in around her. For the first time in years, silence felt like power. Weeks passed, and for a while the silence felt like a blessing. Lila poured herself into her work, finding comfort in the hum of her computer, the clutter of campaign sketches across her desk, and the steady rhythm of coffee cups piling up beside her. Phoenix was unforgiving in its heat, but her apartment felt like a refuge. She thought maybe the storm had passed. She thought maybe, finally, they had given up. Then came the first strike. Her phone buzzed with a notification as she prepared slides for a major client presentation. A social media tag. She opened it and froze. Daniel had posted publicly, his words sharp and dripping with venom. Some people get a little success and suddenly think they're too good for family. Selfish. Ungrateful. He had tagged her name, making sure the wound was visible for the world to see. Her chest tightened as she scrolled through the comments. Caroline had shared the post, adding a crying emoji and the words "so disappointed." James had chimed in with his own line. Never thought my daughter would betray us. Each comment struck harder than the one before. Neighbors, friends from childhood, even distant cousins piled on, some with mocking remarks, others with feigned sympathy for her parents and brother. Lila's hands trembled, her vision blurring. It wasn't just private betrayal anymore, it was public shaming. They were painting her as the villain, the selfish one, the cold-hearted daughter who had turned her back on family. She logged into another platform and found more. Daniel had doubled down, calling her a greedy sellout who abandoned the people who raised her. Caroline had reposted his words, her bio still describing herself as a proud mother. A bitter irony that made Lila's stomach turn. James hadn't posted his own words, but his approving likes on every cruel comment were enough to make his stance clear. Her heart hammered. Rage and hurt battled for space inside her. How many colleagues would see this? How many clients would start to question her character because of lies written by her own blood? The phone rang, jarring her from the spiral. Monica's voice burst through, steady and urgent. Lila, check your email. A client tipped me off. Daniel's been talking to your competitor. Her throat went dry. She opened her inbox, her pulse racing, and there it was. An email from a colleague warning her of rumors that Daniel had contacted a rival agency. He had offered to leak details about her upcoming project, the client list she had spent months cultivating, the strategies she had polished through long nights, everything she had fought to protect. Bile rose in her throat. This was beyond betrayal. It was sabotage. She logged into her agency's server, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she changed every password. locked down sensitive files, and revoked any lingering shared access. Every second counted. Years of work, her entire reputation, the survival of her agency, all of it was tied to the campaign Daniel had tried to sell out. Monica stayed on the phone, her voice grounding. You need to protect yourself legally. This isn't just family drama anymore. Lila nodded, though her friend couldn't see it. I know, she said, her voice tight. She called the lawyer she trusted, laying out everything: the social media posts, the rumors of leaked information, the lies spreading across platforms. The lawyer didn't sugarcoat it. This could be defamation, and if he tried to sell confidential strategies, it's a serious breach. Start documenting everything. That night, Lila sat at her desk screenshotting every post, saving every email, filing every comment into folders marked with dates. It felt like preparing for battle, gathering ammunition for a war she had never wanted but could no longer avoid. By the next morning, her inbox was crowded with messages from clients and colleagues, all referencing the posts. Some asked for clarification. Others passed along gossip, disguised as concern. She drafted a statement for her agency's page. My focus remains on delivering excellent work for my clients. Thank you for your continued trust and support. It was short, neutral, professional. But behind the words, her anger burned. They had already taken $50,000, her trust, her patience, her peace. Now they were reaching for her reputation, trying to dismantle everything she had built. Daniel's latest post appeared on her feed like a slap across the face. She thinks she's too good for us now. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to reply with every receipt, every dollar spent, every lie they had spun. But she stopped. She closed the app, her resolve hardening. They wanted a fight in the mud, but she would fight smarter. She would fight through her work, through her success, and, if necessary, through the law. For years, she had let them define her. Not anymore. The call came 2 weeks later, unexpected but not entirely surprising. They wanted to meet, one last time, they said. A chance to talk, to clear the air, to fix things. The message carried the same weight as all their other pleas calculated, heavy with guilt, masked as love. Against her better judgment, Lila agreed. Not because she believed them, but because she needed to hear the final chords of this discordant song. She chose the place carefully, a small diner on the edge of Phoenix, the kind with chipped tables and the smell of fried onions that lingered in your clothes long after you left. No chandeliers, no polished laughter, no glamour. Just a place stripped of pretense, where the truth might finally stand naked. She arrived early, sliding into a corner booth with her coffee cooling by her hand. She rehearsed nothing. Whatever came out of her mouth would be honest, unfiltered, free of the weight she'd carried for too long. When the door chimed and they walked in her father, her mother, her brother, and even her grandmother Helen, the air thickened immediately. James slid into the booth first, his posture stiff, his tone low. We need to talk, Lila. She leaned back, her expression neutral, her voice steady. I'm here. Caroline followed, her hands clasped together, her tone softened like she had practiced sincerity in front of a mirror. We can move past this. You're our family, we don't want to lose you. Lila set her cup down, her eyes steady. You didn't care about family when you shared Daniel's posts. Caroline flushed, but she didn't answer. Daniel leaned forward, his voice sharp, his glare cutting. You're making us look bad. You cut us off, and now everyone thinks we're the problem. Lila tilted her head, almost amused. You called me selfish in front of the world. You tried to sabotage my business. Who's making who look bad? His jaw tightened, but he offered no denial. Helen, who had stayed quiet until now, reached across the table, her warm, trembling hand seeking Lila's. Her voice was soft, threaded with age, but firm in conviction. Family is about forgiveness. Sweetheart, we've made mistakes, but we're here now. Don't throw away what matters. For a moment, Lila wavered. Her grandmother's eyes carried sincerity, something raw and aching. The plea tugged at her heart, pulling against the wall she had built. But then the memories rose like a tide. The limited guest tag at the resort. The $50,000 drained in 3 years. Daniel's gambling disguised as need. The mocking laughter, the posts branding her ungrateful. She pulled her hand back, her voice even, her decision final. Family doesn't use each other. You treated me like a bank, not a daughter, not a sister. James's face hardened, his tone sharp as a blade. You're being stubborn. We raised you, gave you everything. Lila's laugh was short, bitter. You raised me to pay your bills. I'm done being your safety net. Caroline's voice rose, shrill, desperate. You can't just walk away, we're your blood. Lila stood, reaching into her wallet, pulling out a $20 bill. She set it on the table, enough for her coffee and a tip. Her voice was calm but final. This is the last thing I'll ever cover. You've taken enough. Daniel opened his mouth, but she cut him off with a look sharp enough to silence him. Helen's eyes filled with tears, but Lila could not stay for her sake anymore. She walked out, the bell over the door jingling softly behind her. The warm evening air brushed her face as the Phoenix skyline glowed faintly in the distance. They had come with rehearsed lines, with guilt dressed as love, with pleas sharpened into weapons. They had tried one last time to pull her back into their orbit, but she was no longer theirs to command. As she walked away, the diner shrinking behind her, she felt lighter. For the first time, she believed her future belonged to her. Months slipped by, and with them came a sense of clarity Lila had never known. The apartment that had once been filled with confrontation and slammed doors became her sanctuary again. She woke with the sun spilling across her Phoenix skyline, her mornings dedicated to sketches and strategies, her evenings filled with coffee meetings and late-night brainstorming sessions. Her agency thrived in ways she hadn't dared to imagine before. The campaign she had fought to protect from Daniel's betrayal became a shining success, winning clients one after another. With every new signature on a contract, with every satisfied handshake, she built a future that was hers alone, untethered from demands, free from guilt. She heard about her family in fragments, whispers that reached her through old friends and mutual contacts. Daniel had lost another job, his debts finally catching up with him. The investments he'd gambled her money on had crumbled, leaving him scrambling, drowning in the consequences of his own choices. A pang surfaced in her chest when she heard the news, but it wasn't guilt. It was something quieter recognition that she had been right to step away. Caroline and James faced their own reckoning. Without her support, their house slipped from their grasp, the payments too heavy to manage alone. They downsized into a small rental, their lives shrinking without the cushion she had provided. She didn't celebrate their struggle, but she didn't ache for them either. They had chosen their path, and now they were walking it without her hand to hold. One evening, her phone buzzed with a message from Helen. It was short, her words careful, almost trembling across the screen. I'm sorry, Lila. I didn't see how much they took from you. Lila stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the reply button. Her grandmother's voice at the diner echoed in her mind, pleading for forgiveness, for family. But the weight of the past pressed harder. She set the phone down, her silence deliberate, a choice she had earned. Monica became her anchor through it all. They met for coffee weekly, laughter spilling freely across the small table, a reminder of what real support felt like. Monica had seen through the lies from the beginning, had pushed her to set boundaries, had urged her to protect herself. You're stronger for it, she said one afternoon, her eyes bright with pride. Lila nodded, believing her now in a way she hadn't before. Her strength was no longer just survival. It was the strength of someone who had been tested, who had been drained and diminished, and had chosen to rise anyway. Her agency's success wasn't a fluke, wasn't luck. It was grit, years of work finally unshackled from the weight of her family's demands. Sometimes, late at night, she would think back. The ballroom glowing with chandeliers, the name tag pressed into her hand. Limited guest, the laughter echoing, her cheeks burning. And then the quiet click of the button on her phone, the moment she took back control. She realized it wasn't just the end of something, it was the beginning of her freedom. She stood by her office window one evening, the Phoenix skyline stretching wide, the desert sun fading into brilliant streaks of orange and red. Her desk was cluttered with contracts and sketches, the future spilling out in ink and paper. This was her life now built on her terms, crafted by her own hands. She had lost a family, yes, but she had gained herself. And in the end, that was enough.